Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly. If you are new around here, if you have never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Molly and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bells that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be talking about the solved case of Shana Grice. She was a young woman from England who was horrifically murdered in mid-2016. When Shana's body was found and a murder inquiry was launched by the police, immediately they had a suspect in the case. They instantly had their suspicions as to who had done this, and the reason for this was because in the months leading up to her death, Shana had been the victim of stalking and harassment at the hands of this individual, which she reported to the police a number of times. This case is honestly one of the most frustrating cases I've ever covered because in all honesty, Shana's murder could have been prevented. So many opportunities were missed by the police to help her and protect her from the man who eventually went on to take her life. Just before we get into the case, please listen carefully to the following. This video is about the murder of a young woman and it involves heavy themes such as violence towards women, domestic abuse, harassment, stalking, coercive control, emotional abuse and police misconduct. Viewer discretion is advised. So for this week's case, we are going back to the summer of 2016 in the city of Brighton, a seaside resort located in East Sussex in the southeast of England. And this is Shana Grice. She was a 19-year-old girl who lived in Brighton, but I think she was raised in the town Hove, which is obviously now merged with Brighton and Hove. Shana was an only child. Her mother was called Sharon and she also had a stepfather named Richard. There isn't really much information online about her upbringing, so as far as I'm aware, she had a pretty normal, good childhood. And as a teenager, she was described as being very bright, very friendly, very fun and loving. She was very much a typical teenage girl in terms of her hobbies and her interests. She loved music and boy bands. She loved watching reality TV shows and going to parties, having fun with friends. And she had a lot of friends. She was a very popular young girl and her friends said that out of their friend group, Shana was like the mama bear. You know, that one in the group who is always very, very protective of the others. She's very caring and she's always there for everyone. That was Shana. By the time this case took place, Shana actually lived with friends. She had moved out of her parents' home and she was living with two of her girlfriends in a house in Mile Oak in Portslade in Brighton. And about a year before this case occurred, around mid-2015, Shana began a new job. She started working for a fire alarm company in Brighton. It was called Brighton Fire Alarms and she worked there as a receptionist. And it was at this job where she met a man named Michael Lane. He was a colleague of hers. He also worked at the fire alarm firm. He worked as a mechanic. He was quite a bit older than Shana. At the time that they met, she was 18 years old and I think he was like 26, so he was about 8 years older. And he and Shana quickly developed a friendship after meeting. They became close. However, it soon became clear that Michael in particular wanted more than just a friendship with Shana. He was attracted to her, he fancied her, and he made that pretty obvious. He would often go to see her at work, try to spend time with her. He would show her attention and affection. He was very, very persistent, and it seemed as though Shana eventually started to feel the same way about Michael. She started really liking him as more than a friend too, and so eventually the two began seeing each other. Prior to this, Shana had been in a relationship with a boy named Ashley Cook. They'd actually been together for quite a few years. They were basically childhood sweethearts because they began dating when they were both still in school. But after meeting Michael, Shana ended her relationship with Ashley and, as I said, she began a new relationship with her colleague Michael Lane. They kept their relationship pretty private for the first couple of months. It was basically a secret. They didn't want to tell anyone at work or anything because obviously they both worked at the same place. I don't know whether they thought that that could make it awkward for their other co-workers or something. But yeah, it was kept a secret for the most part in the beginning, and at first this seemed to be the perfect relationship. Michael was very attentive with Shana. He would treat Shana all the time. He would shower her with love and affection and presents. He would always buy her gifts. Shana appeared to have the kind of relationship that any young woman would want. She seemed happy with Michael, but this happiness was rather short-lived. For the first few months, as I said, everything was great until Shana noticed some character traits in Michael that she did not like. She noticed that he could get very jealous and very possessive, and this would constantly lead to arguments between them. And Shana just ultimately decided that, you know what, this relationship isn't working, and so she decided to end it. She broke up with Michael in December of 2015. However, Michael was not happy about this breakup. He did not want to be apart from Shana. He still wanted to be with her, and he just would not accept her decision. He wouldn't accept that she had ended things and just move on. Instead, he basically started harassing her, doing everything that he possibly could to try and get her back. So for example, in mid-January of 2016, it was Shana's 19th birthday, and by this point actually she'd gotten back together with her boyfriend before Michael, Ashley Cook. They decided to give things another go. So Shana was moving on from Michael. However, on her 19th birthday, Michael sent her this huge bouquet of flowers, which obviously Shana was not comfortable with. She didn't want to be with this man anymore, and she had made that clear. So why is he sending her flowers on her birthday? It just made her feel uneasy. I mean, clearly Michael was doing this to try and win Shana back, but of course it didn't work, although Michael was not willing to give up there. He was constantly trying to come up with ideas on how he could make Shana love him again, how he could get her back, and he started putting these ideas into action. For instance, one idea that he had was to let out the air in her car tyres or slash her tyres, and then he would just conveniently turn up outside her home to help her fix them because he was a mechanic. He wanted her to think that he was her hero. He was her knight in shining armour coming to help her whenever she needed him. But again, this tactic proved unsuccessful for him. Still, Shana was staying with Ashley, and so Michael started to target Ashley, the competition, as he saw him. He started causing damage to Ashley's car, he vandalised his car, and he wrote a note for Ashley which he placed on his windshield, and this note read, quote, "Shana will always cheat on you." Obviously, this was Michael's attempt at trying to get Ashley to break up with Shana so that she would be single again. He just would not let this go. He would not leave Shana alone. As I said, he was just harassing her constantly. As well as everything else, Michael started watching Shana, spying on her. He would stand outside of her house and hide behind walls just to see what she did, where she went, etc. Of course, Shana caught him doing this, and she did not know what to do, how to deal with this situation, this obsession that her ex had with her. And so in February of 2016, Shana decided to call the police for help. She called them on the 8th of February 2016, and one of the first things she said to the call handler was, quote, "I don't really know how to start this conversation, but I think I'm being stalked." Now, the call handler who took this report from Shana, she's been named as Miss A in this case. Her real name has not been released, but she would later say that while she was speaking to Shana about what had been going on, about how her ex, Michael Lane, wouldn't leave her alone, she could tell that Shana was scared. Michael Lane had been harassing her so much that she was anxious, she was fearful. But at the same time, you know, she didn't want anything hugely bad to happen to him. She wasn't out for revenge. She didn't want him to lose his job or anything. Miss A claimed that Shana just wanted the police to step in and give Michael a warning so that hopefully he would finally stop. So Michael was contacted. He received a call from Miss A where she apparently gave him, quote, "words of advice to leave Shana alone." But despite this, Michael still refused to back off, and just the month following this, Shana contacted the police again. This second call came in on the evening of the 24th of March 2016 after Shana attended an office party with colleagues, a party that Michael Lane was obviously also at because they still worked at the same place at the fire alarm company. Shana was at this party for a little while and then eventually she decided to leave and walk back home. However, for some reason, her two friends, her flatmates who she lived with, they left the party shortly after Shana and they began walking home, and they took Shana's ex, Michael Lane, with them. No idea why they did that. Perhaps they didn't know about all the trouble that Shana had been having with him. Maybe she was keeping that a bit of a secret, who knows. But anyway, they left the party with Michael and he walked back to Shana's address with them. And obviously when they arrived, Shana was angry. She didn't want him there. She didn't want to see him. And so she left, and I believe she intended to go to her boyfriend Ashley's house. She was going to walk there and just stay with him to get away from Michael. But as soon as she left, Michael noticed and he left the house too and started following Shana. He ran up to Shana on the street. They started arguing and Michael kept trying to snatch Shana's phone from her hands. He wanted to go through it to see who she had been texting and calling because he was so jealous and possessive. And according to sources, in trying to snatch her phone, he actually yanked Shana's hair and hit her. So now he's physically assaulted Shana too. Not only is he emotionally and mentally abusing her and stalking her, he's now physically abused her too. After this attack, Shana ran to her boyfriend Ashley's house. She was obviously very, very upset, very panicked after what had just happened. And so Ashley and his family, his parents, said to Shana, you need to call the police and report what Michael Lane has just done. So she did. She rang them to report the assault, and an officer, Officer PC Trevor Godfrey, was sent out to speak to Shana and take a statement from her about the assault. Following this, PC Trevor Godfrey also spoke to and took a statement from Michael Lane. According to reports, he was actually arrested on suspicion of assault, which he admitted. He admitted that he assaulted Shana. And Michael also told PC Godfrey that he and Shana had been in an on and off relationship for a while. They'd previously been together and then they split up and then together again and then they separated, which was true. Their relationship had previously been very on again, off again, and Michael showed PC Godfrey some text messages between them which showed this. And apparently Shana did not tell PC Godfrey this when she gave her statement. She didn't tell him that she and Michael had previously dated, perhaps because he actually took a statement from her right in front of her current boyfriend Ashley and his parents. Officer Godfrey didn't speak to Shana in private. He spoke to her right in front of them. So maybe she felt uncomfortable talking about her ex with Ashley and her family in the room, as I think anyone would. Whatever her reasons, yeah, she just didn't mention the fact that she and Michael had been in a relationship in her statement. She just told Officer Godfrey about the assault. But when Michael was questioned, he did disclose the fact that they had dated, and this is absolutely unbelievable. This angers me so much. But when PC Godfrey heard this, he seemed to automatically just jump to the conclusion that this was a lover's quarrel, a lover's tiff, nothing serious, just an argument between boyfriend and girlfriend or two exes. And so he didn't feel the need to take this any further. He didn't feel that any action needed to be taken against Michael Lane. He didn't feel that he needed to be charged or anything. In fact, PC Godfrey accused Shana of having wasted the police's time. She had just been physically assaulted by Michael Lane, and he said that her reporting this was a waste of time just because she didn't mention the fact that they had previously dated. PC Godfrey said that Shana had misled him. She wasn't 100% truthful about the situation and the exact circumstances. And you know what? Maybe she wasn't, but I'm sorry, I fail to understand why that's relevant anyway. I know I'm not a police officer, but what is the difference between a woman who is assaulted by a stranger and a woman who is assaulted by an ex or a partner, it's still assault, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. But it appears as though PC Godfrey didn't have the same view. He said that he did not believe that Shana was in any danger, that Michael Lane posed any threat to her, and so Michael was released without charge. He got off scot-free. I think he was literally just given a caution. Instead, Shana was punished for this incident. She was actually given a fine for wasting police time. They ordered her to pay £90. This was the second time she had gone to the police about her ex-boyfriend Michael Lane, a man who had been harassing her and stalking her for months and who had now physically assaulted her, and she was being treated like the criminal, not him. Absolutely unbelievable. Just days after this whole situation, Shana quit her job as a receptionist at the fire alarm firm because obviously Michael Lane still worked there. And shortly after that, she also ended her relationship with her boyfriend, Ashley Cook. And according to a documentary that I watched about this case, it was following this breakup when she actually got back together with Michael Lane for a short period. She started dating him again, which I can imagine that decision probably came with a lot of judgment from people. Some of you guys may even be thinking, why would she get back together with a man that she had reported to the police for stalking? But you have to put yourself in Shana's shoes and think about it from her perspective. This man was not letting her go. No matter what she did, no matter how many times she told him to leave her alone, no matter how many times she went to the police about him, he did not care. He was persistent. He was going to keep bothering her and harassing her and causing her stress and mayhem until finally he got what he wanted, until Shana finally agreed to take him back, and he made that perfectly clear. I obviously can't comment on what was going through Shana's mind at this moment in time, but I wonder if maybe she felt like she had no other option but to get back with Michael and give things another go, because even the police had made it clear that they were not going to step in and help her. They made her feel like she was the problem, that Michael hadn't done anything wrong. So perhaps she started to feel like maybe she had overreacted when she hadn't. Shana had been the victim of coercive control and emotional abuse at the hands of Michael Lane for so long, to the point where he had broken her down enough that she just gave in. Fine, he won, and she agreed to resume the relationship. But of course, this didn't last long either, because Michael did not change his ways. He was still the jealous and possessive and controlling man that he'd always been, and they still argued all the time. And so once again, Shana broke it off. And once again, Michael refused to leave her alone. He refused to just let her get on with her life. He decided that he was still going to make it his mission to hound her and intimidate her until she agreed to be with him. In July of 2016, Michael Lane actually stole Shana's spare key to her house. I'm guessing maybe she kept it hidden in like a plant pot outside or something, and he took it, and using it, he broke in to her home. Early in the morning on the 9th of July, he unlocked the back door and let himself in, and he went straight up to Shana's bedroom. This was around like 6 in the morning, so Shana was still in bed at the time, and she actually heard Michael come upstairs and walk into her bedroom. She didn't say anything, she just stayed in bed and she hid under her duvet, pretending that she was still asleep because she was scared, and all she could hear was the sound of a man breathing heavily. Shortly after, she heard the man leaving, and I think she knew at the time that it was Michael, so when he did leave the house, Shana jumped out of bed and looked out the window, and sure enough, she saw him walking away. Shana now wasn't even safe from this man in her own home, in her own bedroom. Now, Shana wanted to call the police after this, after Michael broke in. However, I think she realised that she may not have necessarily had evidence to prove that he broke in yet, and so she decided to try and get some. She contacted Michael Lane after the break-in. She rang his phone and she recorded their phone call without him knowing, in the hopes that he would admit that he had broken in, and then she could give this recording to the police. keys. And he did. He fully admitted that, yeah, he stole her house key and broke in that day. I've got a couple of quotes from their phone call here. So Shana said, "One question that's really bugging me, why did you take the key in the first place?" To which Michael replied, quote, "Because I wanted to see you and properly talk to you, and I knew you wouldn't let me in otherwise." And Shana responded, "Yeah, but that's not good because it's putting us in danger. You could have flipped at any point." Michael went on to say, quote, "I know, I'm just not right in the head. If I was, I wouldn't have done that, would I?" And Shana responded to that saying, quote, "Well, maybe you need to get help then." Michael also said on the call that he would leave Shana alone now. He wouldn't contact her again, and she agreed that that was what was best. Although, as you can probably guess, Michael did not stick to his word. Shana contacted the police after this phone call with Michael. She told them about the break-in and she gave them the recording where he literally admitted that he did break in. And he was arrested, but unbelievably, once again, this wasn't taken any further by the police. He was literally just given a caution for stealing her house key. That was it. Once again, he was just given a verbal warning by the police. No proper action was taken to try and protect Shana from him. Now put yourself in Michael's shoes for a second. This is the third time that Shana has called the police about him, about how unsafe he makes her feel. And every single time, the police have done nothing. They've treated it as a low risk. So in his head, he's probably thinking, well, I can do anything to Shana and the police aren't going to do anything apart from give me a warning. There's no proper punishment for my actions, so I don't have to stop harassing her. And so he didn't. In fact, just the day following the break-in, on the 10th of July, Shana rang the police again to report that she'd been receiving numerous phone calls from a withheld number. And every time she answered these calls, no one would say anything, but she would just hear a man breathing heavily on the other end of the line, just like the noises that she heard in her bedroom when Michael broke in. So she obviously thought that this was Michael. He just kept calling her repeatedly and just breathing heavily down the phone like he was trying to intimidate her and just frighten her even more. So she called the police, and this is a direct quote from her phone call. She said, "I'm really scared. I'm actually really scared." But again, no proper action was taken. I mean, the police took down a report, but they still didn't think that this was a high priority for them, so they did nothing. And 2 days later, they heard from Shana Grice again. On the 12th of July 2016, Shana called the police about Michael Lane for the 5th time because she had spotted him following her while she was driving. She'd been driving to work that morning when she looked in her rearview mirror and saw Michael driving right behind her. And this wasn't the only time this happened, I don't believe. This had happened on a few occasions where he followed her while she was out driving. And during this report to the police, Shana said that she was now scared every single time she left her home because of the fact that Michael just appeared to be following her everywhere. But regardless, you guessed it, once again, nothing was done. No further action was taken. In fact, shortly after this 5th report, Shana received a letter from the Sussex Police Department informing her that they were closing her case. They weren't going to be looking into it anymore. Not that they'd really looked into it much anyway, let's be honest. Had they properly investigated it, had they taken this 5th report Shana made seriously of her reporting that Michael was following her while she was driving, they might have discovered that he'd actually put a tracker on Shana's car. He'd hidden it, I think, under one of the wheel arches, which alerted his phone every time she started driving somewhere, and it informed him of where she was going. Of course, Shana didn't know about the tracker, and neither did the police because they didn't bother to properly follow up on Shana's report. And it makes me so, I don't even think angry is the word. It makes me feel so deeply, heartbreakingly disappointed because Shana was so let down by the police, by the people that were supposed to protect her. She was just completely ignored. 5 times she asked for their help and they did Nothing. She told them that she was scared of this man and they did nothing. According to sources, in early August of 2016, Shana even told a friend that she saw Michael Lane hanging around outside of her house again, just watching her house. But I mean, she had gotten to the point where she just thought, what is the point of calling the police? She felt like they wouldn't believe her because all of her previous reports about Michael Lane had been brushed off by them, and they'd even fined her for wasting their time. So many opportunities were missed by the police to help Shana. So much more could have been done. A few weeks later, it's reported that Michael Lane told a friend of his that he was feeling depressed because Shana had dumped him and she wasn't going to get back with him. And he apparently said to this friend, quote, "She'll pay for what she's done." A couple of days after this, on the 23rd of August 2016, Michael contacted Shana and he asked her to meet him in a hotel, saying that he just wanted to speak to her and see her one last time before they finally went their separate ways for good. He was blackmailing her. He said, "Come and see me one last time, and if you do, I promise I will actually leave you alone." And so she did. She did go and meet with him, but I think once again he was just trying to convince her to get back with him, but she refused and left. And it seemed as though it was after this when Michael Lane decided that fine, if Shana wasn't going to be with him, then he wasn't going to allow her to be with anyone else. If he couldn't have her, then no one could. Just 2 days later, on the morning of the 25th of August 2016, Shana's boyfriend Ashley, she was back with Ashley by this point, he received a call from Shana's work saying that Shana never came in that morning. She just didn't turn up for her shift, and she also hadn't contacted her work to let them know that she wasn't going to be coming in. Something seemed wrong here. So according to sources, Ashley contacted his father Ian and he asked him if he would be able to go to Shana's house and check that she was okay. However, by the time he arrived at the address, he and Shana's neighbours noticed that Shana's house was on fire. There was smoke coming out of it. And I also read on one source that Ian spotted a bloody footprint just outside of her front door. So emergency services were immediately called to the scene, and when they went into the house, they found the body of Shana Grice. She had been found dead inside of her home at just 19 years old. And she hadn't died as the result of the fire. She hadn't died of smoke inhalation. It was eventually determined that Shana had been brutally murdered before the fire began. The fire was set intentionally by someone, clearly in an attempt to destroy evidence, and the way in which she died was just horrific. Someone had used a knife from Shana's kitchen to slit her throat. So now Sussex police had a murder inquiry on their hands, and of course they had a top suspect instantly. The top suspect immediately became Shana's ex-boyfriend Michael Lane. It had to be him. Shana had called the police about him several times in the months leading up to her death. He had to be the one that killed her. So Michael Lane was quickly arrested on suspicion of murder, and he was taken to the police station where he was questioned the following day. But he completely denied it. He claimed that he was not her killer and that he had no idea she was even dead until he was arrested. However, it wasn't long before the police obtained evidence which proved he was lying. For example, they discovered CCTV evidence of him purchasing a can of petrol at a gas station just the day before Shana was murdered, and petrol had been used to start the fire in her house. They also discovered that a bus in Brighton had captured Michael Lane on their security camera on the morning of her murder close to Shana's home, so that proved that he was in the area at the time the murder occurred. They obtained CCTV of him from after the crime walking along the street carrying a bag, and the police believed that this bag contained the clothes that he had worn during the murder. And they also discovered a pair of Michael Lane's trainers which had been thrown in some bushes not far from Shana's house. These trainers had traces of Shana's blood on them, and they matched the bloody footprint that was found outside the the door of Shana's home. In addition to that, they also obtained evidence which proved that Michael Lane had stolen from Shana after he killed her. He took her bank card from her and he was caught withdrawing money from her bank account at an ATM. They had a substantial amount of evidence linking Michael Lane to the crime, and so when presented with this evidence, Michael Lane decided to change his story. He still claimed that he was innocent, he still claimed that he did not murder Shana, however he was now saying that he did find her body that morning. Michael said that on the morning that Shana was killed, he went to her address and he immediately noticed that Shana's car was parked outside, which he thought was strange because usually by this point she would have left for work already. So he decided to walk towards the house, and the next thing he noticed was that the front door was open. So he walked in the house, he went to Shana's bedroom, and her bedroom door was open also. And when he walked into her room, he found Shana lying on the floor covered in blood, and she was dead. And Michael claimed that he just panicked. He didn't know what to do, and so he did nothing. He just walked out of the house and he left. Of course, the detectives did not believe this story for 1 second, and they said to him in his interview, well, if you really didn't kill Shana and you did just find her body, why didn't you call the police and an ambulance? Why did you just walk away? And he said that he was scared because he knew how it would look. The police would immediately think that he did it if he was the one who called them. I don't know if he said anything about the fire in his new story, whether he admitted that he started the fire or if he, again, was just claiming that someone else did that after he left, just like someone else killed Shana. But as I said, regardless, the police did not believe him. This new story was so obviously a lie. Clearly he was the one who murdered Shana that day, and he was just saying anything he could to cover his tracks, and so he was charged with murder. But Michael Lane was not backing down. He had no intention of confessing anytime soon, and so when it came to his court proceedings, he pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder, which meant that the case was headed to trial. The trial took place at Lewes Crown Court in East Sussex, and it lasted for about 2 weeks in total. The defence tried their best to try and convince the jury that Michael Lane was innocent, but ultimately the evidence put forward by the prosecution was just too strong. It was evidence that proved he murdered Shana, and he did it because she wouldn't get back together with him. It was an act of revenge. And at the end of the trial, Michael Lane was found guilty, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. Shana's parents, her mother Sharon and her stepfather Richard, heavily criticised Sussex police in the aftermath of this case. Understandably, they were angry because they believed that their daughter would still be alive if the police had done more, if they had actually taken Shana's reports of harassment and stalking seriously. And the judge felt the same. He also criticised Sussex police during Michael Lane's sentencing, and I have a quote here from the judge. He said to Sussex police, "You jumped to conclusions. She was treated as the wrongdoer and having committed a criminal offence, and Michael Lane was treated as the victim. There was seemingly no appreciation on the part of those investigating that a young woman in a sexual relationship with a man could at one and the same time be vulnerable and at risk of serious harm. The police jumped to conclusions and Grice was stereotyped." Following Shana's murder, there was a domestic homicide review into her case, which revealed that Michael Lane actually had a lengthy history of stalking and harassment prior to his relationship with Shana. In fact, it was found that he harassed 12 young women and girls in total within a 10-year period between 2006 and 2016, one of which was a young girl named Ellie Mae, and she has come out and spoken publicly about how she was targeted by Michael Lane. He really terrorised Ellie. She said that Michael Lane used to send her photos from outside of her house, outside of her bedroom window, to make it clear that he was watching her. He would send her text messages saying, "I see you." Another text message that she received from him on one occasion basically said that he would pay Ellie £500 if she agreed to go to a hotel room with him and just let him do whatever he wanted to her, which of course terrified her. And as I said, Ellie wasn't the only one. There were several other women that he harassed in a similar way, and Shana was the last. Michael Lane was just a man that would not take no for an answer, no matter how many times these women told him that they weren't interested, that they wanted him to leave them alone. He could not accept it. He could not bear rejection. According to a few sources, in 2010, he was arrested on suspicion of grooming a 14-year-old girl. Although he was never charged for this offence, it didn't go any farther. So Michael Lane technically had no criminal record. Despite all of the crimes that he committed, all the women that he had stalked and harassed, he was never actually convicted of anything until Shana's murder. Another thing that happened in the aftermath of this case is that the Sussex Police Department issued an apology to Shana Grice's family for their wrongdoings, and they also referred themselves to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, which launched an inquiry. And in April of 2017, the IPCC gave Sussex Police 6 recommendations regarding how they can improve the ways in which they deal with cases of stalking going forward. They were instructed to have officers undergo new training for how to investigate stalking cases, and I believe 2 years later, in 2019, Sussex Police announced that they would no longer issue fines for wasting police time to people who had reported domestic abuse or stalking and harassment like Shana did. And I think this applies to police forces all across the UK now too. It was determined that Sussex Police had failed massively to do a meaningful investigation into Michael Lane prior to Shana's death, and an inquest into Shana's case launched by the Independent Office for Police Conduct investigated the actions of 14 police officers and staff in particular who had involvement in Shana's many reports to the police. And in April of 2019, it was announced that 3 of these police officers would face disciplinary action for failing to do their jobs properly in order to protect Shana. PC John Mills was found to have committed gross misconduct because he was the one who decided to just give Michael Lane a caution after he literally stole Shana's house key and broke into her home. Now, he would have been fired from the police force for that. However, it turns out that he actually resigned before his disciplinary hearing took place. But had he not resigned, as I said, he would have been sacked anyway. And PC Trevor Godfrey, who we spoke about earlier, the officer who issued Shana with a fine for wasting police time after Michael Lane assaulted her, the disciplinary panel found that he had committed misconduct, although unbelievably, even at his disciplinary hearing, he completely refuted this. He still believed that he did everything right. He was right to fine Shana because he believed that she had wasted his time, because he said that she had lied repeatedly about the nature of her relationship with Michael Lane. As I just said, PC Trevor Godfrey was found to have committed misconduct rather than gross misconduct like PC John Mills, because apparently the panel concluded that whilst his failings were serious, they believed that there were mitigating factors surrounding the decisions that he made in this case. And Shana's parents were actually very upset and angry at the fact that he was only found to have committed misconduct and not gross misconduct. They said that they felt the charge of misconduct against PC Godfrey was, quote, a joke and the hearing a sham. They also described the hearing as being a wholesale character assassination of our daughter. PC Trevor Godfrey had retired by the time his hearing took place, but like PC John Mills, it was determined that he also probably would have been sacked anyway due to his actions. My heart breaks for Shana's loved ones. I cannot imagine just how devastating her death must be for them, not just because she was murdered in the most horrific way, but also because it could have been prevented. There were so many chances, so many opportunities for Sussex Police to step in and protect Shana. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, if police had actually taken proper action against Michael Lane, if they had done more than just give him a verbal warning for stalking and assaulting Shana, who knows, maybe he would have actually backed off and left her alone, because he would have realised that there were serious consequences for his actions. But they didn't do that. And what kind of message does that send to other abusers and victims of abuse? That the police are more likely to believe the perpetrator over the victim? It's just awful. Shana was so let down, and I just hope to God that Sussex police really have learnt from this case, because this should never happen again. But that concludes this case. That is the case of Shana Grice. A very heavy case. I am going to be leaving some domestic abuse helplines linked in the description box, as well as I'll see if I can find some helplines and charities who can provide support to victims of stalking and harassment too, just in case they are needed by anyone watching this video. But yeah, that is it for this case. As always, please do let me know your thoughts and opinions on this case in the comments. I'm sure a lot of you guys will be just as angry and disappointed as I am about this case. So yeah, do let me know what you think. Also, feel free to let me know of any other cases that you would like to see me cover on this channel. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Molly. Bye.